Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this spiral illustration effect in Photoshop. I recently saw this engraving, which was all done from a single spiral, and I thought it'd be fun to recreate a similar effect inside of Photoshop. Now, at the beginning of this tutorial, I do use Illustrator, so if you don't have Illustrator and just want to do the Photoshop steps, I have included the file I created in a link in the description of this video. So go ahead, download that, and then let's get started. Here you can see the original reference file, and essentially what we have is this continuous spiral. And here in the close-up shot here, you can see that this spiral changes its width in order to create the appearance of shadows and highlights, which in effect creates the image that you see here. So we're going to try to recreate this using Photoshop. Obviously, it's not going to be the same because I don't have the same images and all that good stuff. However, what we want to recreate is this basic effect of a spiral changing its stroke width in order to create an illustration. And then just for completing the full effect, what we'll do is also add some variation to it. You can see that this is not a perfect circle. There are variations in it. And then also you can see that this does have this white border here, and then also a antique paper texture. So these are all things that we're going to want to simulate in Photoshop. The first thing that we need to create is this really dense spiral. Now, I'll probably not create one quite as dense as this, or you're just going to see a moire pattern like you can kind of see here. But we'll do one probably about like this so that we can see the effect. Now, once we've done this, you'll be able to see how you can use the same effect in other images. All right, first thing we're going to do is go into Illustrator. So here I have Illustrator. If you have the Adobe Creative Cloud membership or subscription, you have Illustrator. If you don't, you can just skip forward. I have included the file that you'll need out of Illustrator, so you can just go into the Photoshop step. But if you have Illustrator, this will teach you how to do a linear spiral. So I'm just going to go to New File. I'm going to make this whole thing 8 by 10. So let's go to View All Presets here. I don't see an 8 by 10. So what I'm going to do is just change this to inches. Change this to 8 by 10. I'm going to change this to RGB color, and I'm going to keep my raster effects to 300 ppi. And this is pixels per inch. Then let's hit create, and this will create our Illustrator document. And the first thing I want to do here is create just a center guide. So let's just turn on our ruler with Command R. That'll turn on our ruler, and we can drag this and it will snap in the middle here. It should, and if it's not snapping in the middle, it means you don't have your smart guides turned on, which we do, so it should be snapping in the middle. Let's see. Why is that not? Well, I'm not sure why that's not snapping in the middle, but what you can do is you can select it, go to Align under Window Align, and here under the Align, you can click on this one, and you'll see that snaps it to the center there. And then I'm going to add another guide here, and we're going to snap this one to the center vertically. And then I can close this. Okay, so if we look here to this tool here, which is kind of our shapes tool, and I click and hold on that, what I'm looking for here is the the tool to create a spiral. I don't see it there, so that probably means it's turned off. And you can see it here. So this is the spiral tool. Now with the spiral tool, you're going to see if I click here and drag out, what it's doing is it's creating a spiral where each segment of the spiral is closer together than the last one. And that's not what I want. And unfortunately with the spiral tool, let me go ahead and delete this and just click here. That'll bring up my spiral options. Even if I turn the decay to, let's say, 99 and change this to, you know, some really high figure like 50, or even let's create a much bigger figure. Let's click on here again and change this to 300. What it's doing is each piece of this is decaying. So there's not really a way with the spiral tool to have the decay at 100%, because at 100% I just get a circle like this. So you cannot use the spiral tool to do a linear spiral, unfortunately. So what we're going to do is instead use the ellipse tool. And let's go ahead and snap from this center. And I want to just make this so that it goes outside of my frame here. That's going to be my first circle. I'm going to give this a black stroke. And I'm going to dismiss this here. And in my stroke panels, I actually prefer to have my options toolbar here. So I'm going to go to Workspace and do Essentials Classic. That'll give me my tool options up here. And here I can just change this to maybe 0.5 under the stroke there. All right, then I'm going to take this and go onto my scale tool, which is this tool here. Also, if you just hit S on the keyboard, that'll bring up your scale. Now, if I hold Option as I scale here, oops, I actually need to scale first. So I'm going to start scaling and then hold down the Option, and that'll make a copy. And then I'm also going to hold down Shift. That'll make sure that my scaled copy stays circular. And here I'm going to bring this down. I really want to bring this down even more, so I'm going to scale it even more until it's really small. So something like this. And it's possible when you scale down that the stroke itself will become really scaled. If I double click on scale, I have these two options turned off: scale corners, scale strokes and effect. So when I'm scaling this down, it'll remain a 0.5 stroke. But if that doesn't happen, you can either redo your scale step with the scale, stroke, and effects turned off, or just go ahead and change your stroke back to 0.5 after you've scaled it down. All right, next we're going to use this blend tool here, and the shortcut for that is W. And we're going to go and click on just the leftmost anchor point here, and then the leftmost anchor point here. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a step between these two. Now, right now, it's only creating one step. We want to create far more steps. So what I'm going to do is double click on the tool, and we're going to change this to specified steps. And then we're going to change this to 300. And I think this is probably a little too much. It's going to start giving us a moire pattern. So let's go ahead and do 200. Now, one thing to realize here is that we're actually going to cut this in half. So even if I do it a little bit more, it'll end up being less. So maybe I'll go back to the 300 and you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So here it is at 300, but realize we're only going to use half of this. So I'm going to hit OK. And right now, if I click on this, you can see I only am selecting, and the blue line here indicates what I'm selecting. I'm really just selecting these two paths, and the rest is an effect being created by Illustrator. So I actually want all these to be real circles. So I need to go up to Object and Expand. And then we'll just leave all this on default and hit OK. And now you can see I have all these various lines. Okay, so I'm going to deselect that by just clicking outside of it. And here I want to go to my direct selection tool, which allows me to select anchor points rather than entire objects. So I'll click on that, and the shortcut for that, by the way, is A on your keyboard. And then from up here, I want to select all the way down to about the center. Now, if I zoom in here, you'll see that this last one here I did not select, so I'm just going to hold Shift and select that last one. And then I'm going to do Command X or Edit Cut. And that'll basically get rid of the top half of this circle. Now I want to paste it back in place. So I'm going to go ahead and go on my direct selection tool, click outside of my selection so it deselects. And then I want to paste it, but I want to paste it in place, meaning I want it to be exactly where it landed before. So I'm going to go up to Edit and then Paste in Place. And there you can see it now pasted it exactly from where I copied it, and that's where I want it. All right, next, go up to View and make sure that under your snapping options, you have Snap to Point turned on. And then we're going to select all these again. Let's go down here and make sure we selected all of them. We did. I'm going to go to the very end here, zoom way in, and here if I grab this anchor point, you'll notice that my tool changes. I don't want that. So if I hold down Command, you'll notice that my tooltip temporarily changed, and I can select the anchor point. So I'm going to do that, click, and then basically I want to snap this to this anchor point here. You'll notice my cursor changes to white when it does that. Whoops. Let's do that again. We want to make sure it snaps. There you go. All right, so now if I turn off my guides, which I can do with Command semicolon, here it is, rulers, hide rulers, guides, sorry, hide guides, Command semicolon, you can see I've now created a linear spiral. If we zoom right in here, you can see that this spiral just continues to go out, 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 and there is equal distance between all the lines, but you'll also notice that there's two spirals. So we don't want that, we just want one. So in order to turn this into one spiral, I'm going to select the entire thing, go to Object, Path, and Join. And now if we zoom way in here, you'll notice that it zoomed all this. If I select it, it's all one continuous path. So now I'm going to go back to my direct selection tool, select this middle anchor point and delete it. And now I basically have two continuous paths. What I'm going to do is just hold down Option, and that'll select the entire path rather than just this segment. So holding down Option while on the white arrow tool, click that and then hit delete. Okay, so now we have one spiral that's just going out continuously. And what we're going to do is pull this into Photoshop. So first, just make sure your stroke is black. You can double click on this, make sure this is 0, 0, 0, and then we'll do Edit, Copy. Okay, now let's bounce into Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then let's go to New File, and I'm going to change this to inches, and I want the same file size that I had inside of Illustrator. So 8 by 10 at 300 resolution. I'm going to do my background white and put this on Adobe RGB and then hit create. And then here I want to paste. So I'm going to do edit, paste. And let's go ahead and make this a smart object and then hit OK. Now you can see it's pulled it in at 61% in order to fit in the canvas. I want it to be 100% so that it goes to the outer edges of my canvas. I'm going to hit OK. All right, the next thing we're going to do is blur this so that the blur extends from here to encompass the entire white part of our element here. So to do that, let's just measure here. You can kind of see on my tooltip there, the width is about 10 inches. So let's go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I think if we blur this 5 pixels, even that might be too much. Let's try 3 or maybe 4. So 4 is giving me a nice blur. Let's hit OK. I'm going to make a copy of this with Command J. And this one, I'm going to change the blur to 2. That'll just give me a stronger dark element in the middle. Okay, next we're going to use some hard mix magic. So let's go ahead and put these 2 layers in a folder. I'm going to select both of them with just holding Shift and then do Command G to group them. And we're going to call this Spiralizer. Now, one other thing here is we need this layer, this spiralizer, to have a white background. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a layer. We'll call this white background. I'm going to fill this with white. So we'll go to Edit, Fill. Let's change this to white. And then I'm going to put this at the bottom of the layer stack. And I'll show you why that's important in a second. Okay, next we're going to pull in our image. So let's make a new folder group and we'll call this image. And let's go to File, Open, and inside our Assets folder, I'm going to grab this Andreas file from Unsplash, and this is going to kind of act as our head here. I'm going to go ahead and use my Object Selection tool and just make a rectangular marquee around the head itself. And that included the whole thing. So let's go to our quick select, hold down Option, which will minus from our selection, kind of go around the beard here. Did a little too much. So now without holding this, just going back onto my regular, or actually I want this on the add to selection. I'm going to select just this beard area here. And that looks good. Let's do Command C. And then in here, under the image folder, I'll do Command V for paste. Let's go ahead and turn off the spiralizer for now. And I'm going to turn this, we'll call this head. I'm going to do Command T for transform. Make this a bit smaller. I want it to snap in the middle. I kind of want the nose to be right in the middle. So let's go to View. And let's go to Guides, New Guide Layout. And here, if we default this, I want to delete the gutter there and make 2 columns, 2 rows without any gutter. This will basically just give me a center line. And I want to put his nose right in the center of the image there. So something like this. Okay, the other thing I want to do is just create a little bit of texture behind his head. So let's go back to File, Open. And I'm going to grab this Tai Chi. Go ahead and open that. And then we'll just do a circular marquee kind of from the center here. Now, if you start doing a center like this and it's off center, well, here I'm holding Option to make it go from the center, Shift to keep it a circle. If I also add the space bar, I can kind of move my selection around. And I want it just about like that. Let's go ahead and move it around just a bit. Then we'll do Command C to copy. And then I'll do Command V to paste. I'm going to put this underneath our head and center it up here and make it a little bit smaller. So something like this. I also don't want it quite so strong. So I'm just going to take the opacity down to maybe about 40%. Okay, so this is the image that I want to stylize with our spiralizer. So let's go ahead and turn our spiralizer layer back on, or a group. We're going to change the blend mode of this to hard mix. Right away, you can see that it's starting to create the effect we want. Now, I don't want any color in it, so in my image group here, I'm going to add an adjustment layer called black and white. What that'll do is it'll just turn that image black and white. All right, now at 40%, this is all disappearing. So let's go ahead and make this just above 50%. And basically the way the hard mix blending mode works is it takes anything that is above 50%, turns it black, and takes anything that is below 50% and makes it white. So it's basically a blending mode that's doing a threshold effect on your layer. And because we're using the black and white information from the spirals, those are dictating what turns to black and what turns to white. So if we zoom in here, you can see, in effect, we're creating this spiral that is changing its width based on the image underneath it. Now, this effect, this threshold effect, using the hard mix is very unforgiving, meaning it's only black or white. So what we need to do is we need to adjust the fill so that it has a little bit of feather. So we're going to reduce this down to maybe 90%. We don't want to do too much because we do want this effect to be pretty strong. Now, this is one of these blending modes where opacity and fill have very different results. So if I bring this back to 100 and reduce this to 90, you'll notice that it's not having the same effect at all. Essentially what this does is it takes the effect and as a composite reduces the opacity of the effect. Whereas reducing the fill reduces the actual strength of the effect. So we're going to reduce the fill to 90 here. And those are the basic steps. Now, the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to create some distortion. And we need to do that inside this vector. Now, for the distortion, if we look at our original reference, let's go ahead and reopen our original reference here. You'll notice that it kind of moves with the shape of the face. So the lips, the nose, and so forth. We could do that, or if we wanted a template that we could use for any file, what we can do is just add some random distortion through it. And because I do want to use this template for other effects, meaning other images, what I want to do is just add some random distortion to it. So what we're going to do is use the displace effect to do that. And the way the displace effect works is it pushes pixels based on a black and white image. So let's first just create a new layer. And I'm going to put this above the spiralizer and we'll call this displace pattern. And I want to make sure my colors here are black and white. I hit D on my keyboard. That'll default these. It's basically the same as clicking this little icon here. Then we're going to go to Filter, Render, Clouds. And that'll just create this noise effect. Now, this might work by itself. Otherwise, we can add a little bit of blur to it. But let's try just on its own. And here I'm going to do image duplicate. That'll make a copy of our file. We'll call this displacement map. And the displacement map needs to be saved as a PSD file. But I don't need all these other layers. I just need my displacement. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these other layers. And then go ahead and save this. We'll save it in our assets folder as a displacement map. And I'm going to keep it open just in case I want to blur it. Let's go back to our untitled. We can throw the displacement map in here away. And here we're going to create the effect on top of these. Now I could do this two ways. I could repeat the effect on both of these smart objects, or I could select both of them and combine them into a single smart object and then apply the effect on there. Now this really depends on how much editability you want your file to have. So for example, changing the Gaussian blur amount here will actually change the effect on your image. So if you want to keep that adjustability, then you probably want to just individually apply the effect on these two layers separately. So that's what we'll do. I'm going to select the first one here, go to Filter, Distort, Displace, and let's go ahead and do this 5 pixels each. And then we're going to hit OK and select our displacement map. And then what I can do is take this same effect and hold down Option and Command and drag it up to this. Now that unfortunately replaced it. So let's just drag it. There you go. So just hold Option and then drag it up. I'm going to make sure it's in the same sequence here. And now you can see this. Let's go ahead and turn off our guides with Command semicolon. You can see that this now has a little bit of distortion in it. Might be a little hard to see, but it does. If I turn this on and off, you can kind of see. If you want that to be stronger, just change this to maybe like 20 and 20. This is basically how many pixels of distortion it's going to move around that displacement. I'm going to do it 20 just so you can really see the effect. There you can kind of see how strong that effect is. I think this is too much and also a little bit too noisy. Like, I like the stronger distortion, but it's too much. So we have two options here. I can just blur my displacement map. Let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to lock the transparency so when I blur it, I don't get any transparency along the edges. And let's maybe do 8 pixels and then hit save. And then back in here, let's redo our displacements. Reselect this. And I'm liking that. I like that it looks a little bit like it's going around some parts of his face. Okay, and then the last thing I'd want to do here is I need to add a little bit of a frame around this. Now, because all of our image is happening in here, that's where I'm going to add the frame. I'm also, just so that I can see my edges here, I'm going to go add another layer here and make sure it's under the black and white, and we'll just call this edges. What I'm going to do here is go to my gradient tool. I want to make sure this is on classic gradient. I'm going to use a foreground to transparent and then just add some lines to our edges like this. Now you'll see that those immediately take on the effect from our spiralizer. So kind of cool there. And I can also just reduce this if I don't want them to be as thick. I can reduce them down to maybe 77%. All right, then on my image layer, I'm just going to go to my rectangular marquee. I'm going to make a selection around the entire thing and then right mouse click, transform selection. And then if I hold down Option, it's going to reduce it from the center point. If I hold down Shift, I can kind of freeform this. Just want this to be kind of equal distance away from all the edges. I'm going to hit the return there and then add a mask. And that'll cut out and create this kind of white frame around here. Now I want this white frame to not be so sharp. I can double click on my mask here and that'll bring up my mask properties. I'm just going to add a bit of feather to this. That way it looks like these strokes were deliberately made thinner as they got to that edge there. So just add to that nice effect. And then on top of the whole thing, I want to add some color to it. So first thing I'm going to do is just add a gradient map. And this, I'm going to take the colors here and kind of make it so that instead of black, it's kind of a dark brown color. And then toward the middle, I want to make a little bit more orange. So something like this. And then on top of all this, I want a bit of a paper texture. So I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and in the assets, you see this Texture Labs paper. This I got from the Texture Labs website. If you haven't checked that out, you should. Great resource for free textures. And also Brady, who runs it, has an awesome YouTube channel where he gives tutorials on how to use textures. Honestly, when it comes to using the various blending modes in Photoshop, there is nobody better than Brady. All right, let's go ahead and place this. I'm going to go ahead and do a transform with Command T. Just kind of make this the size I want it, and then put this on multiply. Maybe take it down a little bit. And there we have our effect. Now, the beauty of this effect is I can pull in any image here and it will take on all the effects because this spiralizer is happening inside of our layer stack. So let's go to File, Place Embedded. I have a few examples here I want to show you. So one is this cheddar nap. I'm going to go ahead and place that, make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it so that this ring here is kind of in the center of the spiral. And then I need to adjust the lightness and darkness of it because there's too much of the image that's past the 50% lightness. So I can just do that with Command M, bring up my curve, just kind of pull the middle of this down so I get more of my hands showing. And if I don't want this to resort all the way to black, can also just pull that up a little bit like this. And we're getting a pretty nice effect there. I can also pull down my whites if I don't want them to be so strong. So maybe something like this. And now we get this really nice, cool engraved look. You could use this for, a wedding invitation or something. Let's do File, Place Embedded, and let's grab another one here. This is another image from Unsplash. And this could be a cool logo if you wanted to do kind of a logo effect, something like that. And then here also I would want to make this a little bit darker. So we do something like that. Very cool effect. You can see that that spiral is going up the entire image. And then finally, got one other one here I wanted to show you that I thought looked really cool, and that is this Cami Storm image. And we'll just make that the size of our canvas here. So there you have it. That's how you recreate that illustration effect inside of Photoshop. Now, if you're interested in mastering Photoshop to bring your imagination to life, I am soon launching my Nucly Academy 2.0. So you can join the waitlist. I've included a link to that in the description of this video. Also, if you're interested in more tools and professional training for Photoshop, go to nucly.com. Otherwise, here are some other tutorials for you to check out. Again, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you next time.